Hello and welcome to this tutorial for Focal Point Digital. Today we're going to be working with this Santa and Wagon digital backdrop, and hopefully I can give you some quick tips and tricks to make your editing life that much easier. So let's get started. First things first, as with any digital backdrop, you want to check for direction of light. This one is a little bit harder, but not that difficult to read. It is outside, so you can get away with a little bit more as far as direction of light. But I can tell from the way the shadows are dropping here and the highlights on Santa's fur that the light direction is actually coming from the top and the left. Not really top, sort of midway and the left. These long shadows falling down from the wagon. And the reason we're looking for direction of light is so we can have this similar direction of light in our subject's photo. So over to our subject photo here. This little guy, we just set him up outside, and as you can see, in a parking lot on just a bin. We knew we were shooting for this backdrop. So the only thing that we were really aiming for was to make sure that he was making eye contact with Santa. So Mom is standing over here and he's looking up at Mom. And I have him in full shade here. And that's the key. You don't want any highlights from some heavy sun. You can see it's quite sunny out, but we were in full shade. The sun is coming from this direction, from the top and the left, and so the sun direction does match that in this backdrop. And you know, he's just seated to where we could easily drop him into this image. So let's get started on his layer, and we're going to use the quick selection tool. And what I'm going to do here is, it's on the plus sign, and I want to make my brush a bit bigger, so keyboard shortcut, just the right bracket key will increase the size. And then I'm just going to run around all the parts of the image of him that I want to include in my composite. And then I'm just hitting the Alt key and the left bracket key. So the Alt key makes it the minus sign there, take away what we don't want. And then the left bracket key lowers the size of this brush. So I'm going to hold down Alt again to remove that. I went a little too far, so just going to add it back. And I think I'm going to make sure. Okay, so now we're going to click Select and Mask. And this is just a bit of fine tuning. I'm going to increase the brush size a little bit, and then I'm going to run around all of the edges. And refine my selection here. And Photoshop has gotten to the point where it's pretty darn good at this if you have contrast between your subject and the background. Especially at picking up hair, where if you're doing it on your own without using quick selection, you can make it look a little bit like you're making a hair helmet, and that doesn't look all that believable when you're working in compositing. Okay, I'm not going to worry too much about this part because it's going to be hidden by the wagon. And this does take up a lot of RAM, so be prepared to wait a little bit. Sometimes it lags. Okay, so now we're going to export this once my computer catches up. And we're going to New Layer with Layer Mask and click OK. And it's not a perfect selection, and that's no big deal. We can refine it once we've dropped him in to the backdrop. So I'm just going to use my Move tool, pick him up, head on over to the layer I'm looking for and drop him in. Now, as you can see, he's definitely too big, way too big. So what I'm going to do here, the latest update of Photoshop is not setting my photo to the top left of my screen. It's driving me nuts. Anyways, so he's obviously way too big for this wagon. So what I'm going to do now is click on his layer, click Control T, and then I'm going to hold down the Shift key as I pull the corner to maintain his aspect ratio so he doesn't go all wonky. If you don't hold the corner down, it doesn't maintain that aspect ratio and you can do some pretty wonky things. So you're going to want to click Control T, again hold Shift as you're pulling down from the corner, and we're going to size him into this wagon. So he's not a young child, he's about 8 years old, so he would fill up this wagon. So I'm going to make him about this size. And that, I think even he's a little bit big there. We also want to size him with relation to Santa, so we want to make sure he doesn't look bigger than Santa. And as you can see, I'm placing him as though he is seated down into the wagon. And next step, I'm just going to head over to his layer mask, and I'm just going to paint away this part of his body, and it's going to be so fast, quick and easy, and boom, he'll look like he's right in there. So I'm just using the black brush and to paint away the part of his layer that I don't want. I'm going to zoom in even further and using a small brush, and I'm just going to run along the edge of this wagon. Increase my brush size to make this a bit faster for you. And you can see there's a bit of wonkiness with the selection from Photoshop, so I'll go in and clean that up as well. But we're going to do this first, so just running along the edge of that wagon. And I'm not drawing in very straight lines today. My hands are sore from editing, but that's okay. When you're using a layer mask, you can always go back and paint back anywhere that you messed up, as opposed to, say, using the eraser tool or whatnot. Then you can't go back, so that's why we use layer masks. I apologize to anyone who I'm over explaining to. Okay, left bracket key to lower the size of my brush, and I did go a little too far. I'm going to head back over to his layer mask and paint back with the white brush where I took too much off, and then here I didn't take enough off. Alright, and boom, in very short order, we have him sitting in that wagon. Now, we're going to refine this composite. So as you can see, when Quick Selection did this selection, it left in a bit of the greenery from behind him, and that's not a problem either. We're going to just go over to his layer, select a small black brush, and we're going to paint that off. And this can be fairly tedious, but time and patience make for really good composites. And see, I went a little too far and took his boot strap off, so I'm just paint it back in. I'm using the X key to switch between the black and white palette here when I've gone too far, when I haven't done enough. And yeah, I'm just painting away the parts of his layer that I don't want in this photo. And I think it's really important to use a similar background idea when you're photographing for a composite. It's not absolutely necessary. Obviously, you could shoot, oopsie, you could shoot this in studio if you wanted to, but you're going to get the light quality will be more similar or the same if you are using an outdoor backdrop and you shoot your subject outdoors. And same goes for if you're shooting a studio if you're working for a studio backdrop and you shoot it in studio. So it just makes your life a whole lot easier if you do that, just a little pre-planning and knowing what you're working with. And sometimes you don't have that luxury, and so you can make it work. It's just a lot easier if you plan ahead. Okay, so let's zoom out here and see how we've done cleaning up that selection. And the one thing I love about using quick selection, I think I mentioned it before, is that you do get these stray hairs with that quick selection tool in Photoshop, and I just love that because then it just makes it look like that much more real of an image, and maybe you didn't Photoshop it. Who really knows? The next thing to do here is to refine the light on him. He's not quite bright enough for this scene, so what I'm going to do is add an adjustment layer, and I'm going to go into levels, and I'm going to right click and create a clipping mask so that it's only affecting his layer. And I'm just going to slide over and increase the midtones, and then I'm going to slide over and increase the highlights, and then I'm going to bring back some of the shadows. And that'll just give a nice contrast there. So let's look at before and after, and I do like that a lot. And then I'm also going to add a curves layer, and I'm just going to pull up sort of top 65% of this curve, and I didn't clip it, so it's affecting the whole scene. So let me clip it so it's only affecting him. And let's see, we want him a little bit brighter. There we go. And then pull back, give him some contrast there. Beautiful. Now I'd also like to make him a little bit warmer, and you can do that in a few different ways. I like to use the camera raw filter, so I'm going into filter. I've clicked on his layer, camera raw filter, and I'm just going to pull up the temperature into the yellows a bit here, just to warm it up so that he more closely resembles the coloring in this scene. So there's before, there's after, and I'm thinking he's matching quite well. And if you think that you'd like to add some shadowing in here, and I think it would be nice to do, again, you can do that in a few different ways. If you're trying to keep things quick and simple, you can just use the burn tool. You can head on over to his layer, and where you know there would be some shadowing, you can just add a bit of burn in on his boots, and a little bit here on his pants. And let's just see that. So easy. You could also create another layer here and use the multiply blend mode, but I don't think it's necessary to overcomplicate this one. This is a really pretty simple composite. And because you don't have landing shadows to deal with, meaning where his butt and his feet are contacting this wagon, it's hidden, so you can get away with a few things and you don't have to have the most perfect landing shadows. I think I would also add some shadows in on the wagon layer, and I'm going to do that by going to the backdrop layer and duplicating it by dropping it onto the plus sign here. And then I'm going to hold down the Alt key and hit the layer mask. And then I'm going, that hides everything. And then I'm going to go into multiply. And then I'm going to head on over to the brush tool, turn my opacity and flow down to about 30%. Get a nice soft brush, and I'm just going to paint in some shadows here using the multiply, because he would be casting a shadow into this wagon with the light coming from the top and the left there. So there'd be a shadow in there, and there'd be a shadow behind his back. All right, let's just see without the multiply layer and with the multiply layer. Again, it just gives you that extra layer of believability that you're looking for with these composites. And I do see, let's see if that's on his layer. It is. So there's a little bit here that was left behind by the quick selection tool. So I'm just heading into his layer, into his layer mask, and back over to the black brush. And just nice small brush to paint this off. And I went a little too far, so I'm going to flip back over, paint it back. Just that little bit of rim light on his hand. Beautiful. Okay, and I think that that is a very believable looking composite right there. And if you'd like to adjust the positioning of your subject in the wagon, moving back and forth, no big deal. I think I like him right about there. The final thing that I do like to do with composites is to add an adjustment layer on top of the entire scene, just to sort of blend the light together so they look like they were both there. And I also like to add a bit of light direction. Not everybody likes to do this. I like to do this. I've created this overlay. Would it be called an overlay? Well, I call it an adjustment. And I am going to just drag it in and bring it up to the top, release the clipping mask. And I'm going to pull this down over the whole scene. And as you can see, that doesn't look very good, and it's hidden everything that we've done, but I'm just going to go to the screen mode, and that is now applying this to the entire scene, and it's far, far too bright. So I'm going to bring the opacity way down. I'm going to bring it down to about 10% or 11%. So there it is with, there it is without. And I think, you know, if you like it brighter, you can make it brighter. It's totally up to you. I'm in this case just using it to blend these two images together. And I'm going to leave it at that. And then I'm going to go ahead with the last step, and I'm going to add this adjustment, a curves adjustment to the entire scene. So this one I'm not clipping, so it will affect everything below it. So I'm just going to lift up the highlights a bit and bring the shadows down a tiny bit and give that contrast and blend it all together. So here it is without, and there it is with the adjustment layer. And all of those things are going to be a flavor to taste sort of a thing that's going to be up to what you like and what you want to see in your edits. And I hope that this was helpful to you, and have yourself a fabulous day.